General Hospital spoilers reveal that one of the most profound and dangerous psychological shifts quietly unfolding in Dante's life is the inevitable resurgence of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Trauma he suffered during his undercover missions in the past. But what makes this recurrence more devastating than any he's faced before is the root cause, a brutal, soul-shattering truth, Gio. The young man Dante once criticized, kept at a distance, and deeply hurt with harsh words, turns out to be his biological son. The moment Dante learns the truth, every fragile layer of psychological stability he had carefully constructed collapses like a tower pulled from its foundation. No defense can shield him from this pain. No rational facade strong enough to hold back the tidal wave of emotion roaring inside him, a storm threatening to devour everything. Dante once believed he was healed. He thought he had moved past the darkness from his time with the WSB, where survival demanded inhumane, emotionless decisions. He believed that with Sam's love, Rocco's stability, and a renewed bond with his family, he had rebuilt a life worth living. But all of that faith is buried in the instant he realizes Gio, who stood before him, accused unfairly and pushed away, is the son he never knew he had. This truth isn't just a shock, it's a dagger to his already scarred soul, tearing open wounds he thought he had sealed. From that moment on, everything Dante had fought to protect starts to unravel. His relationship with Sam becomes strained. His bond with Jason, once a pillar of support, begins to fracture under irrational accusations. His ties to Olivia, Ned, even Sonny, grow tense as Dante blames everyone around him for hiding the truth. But deep down, he knows the person he blames the most is himself. He cannot forgive himself for hurting Gio, for missing the signs, for treating his own blood like a stranger. That pain, that guilt, becomes the breeding ground for a new kind of obsession, deep, violent, and self-destructive, that grows stronger with each passing day. Dante's behavior becomes unpredictable. His reactions fall outside his usual moral compass. He grows irritable, withdrawn, isolated, yet explosively angry at anyone who touches the wound inside him. There are moments he wants to smash mirrors to punish himself. Nights he can't sleep, haunted by nightmares of Joe's shattered expression upon learning the truth. These visions, combined with flashbacks from old missions, send Dante into a spiraling disorientation. He no longer knows where he is, who he is, or how to repair what's broken. And that is the beginning of an inevitable disaster. If no one recognizes how dangerously close Dante is to the edge, if no one intervenes to get him help, he may spiral into a darkness with no exit. Panic attacks could lead him to draw his weapon on the wrong person. His anger could drive him to hurt the very people he loves, Gio, Sam, or even Rocco. One mistake could cost him his job, destroy the image of the father and protector he's clung to for so long. And the most dangerous part? Dante is starting to believe he doesn't deserve forgiveness, doesn't deserve to be a father, doesn't deserve to remain in the family he unknowingly wounded. All of this is building toward a crisis unlike any he's faced. Not just a personal breakdown, but a systemic one, where the strongest become the most fragile. If Dante isn't saved, he won't just lose his connection to Gio, he'll drag the entire Falconeri, Corinthos, Quartermain family into collapse. And the most terrifying truth of all? This disaster doesn't come from an external threat, but from a truth so painful, so inevitable, that Dante never saw it coming, and cannot forgive himself for realizing it too late. If Port Charles wants to keep Dante, if Gio hopes to have a real father, if this family wishes to heal instead of shatter, then now is the time. Urgent psychological treatment. A hand reaching into the dark. A forgiveness strong enough to transcend everything. If not, what's unfolding won't just be a PTSD relapse, it will be the complete destruction of a man who once symbolized courage, love, and duty. And this time, no one can afford to stay on the sidelines. Dante is being pushed into a psychological breakdown as everything around him fractures and spins beyond his control. The pressure from unresolved past trauma, the newly uncovered truth about Gio, And the complicated current dynamics with Lulu and Rocco have formed a brutal whirlwind, pulling him into the eye of a storm he doesn't know how to escape. After discovering that Gio is his biological son, a truth hidden from him for far too long, Dante doesn't just experience overwhelming shock. He descends into an internal crisis unlike anything he's ever known. He must now face the guilt of hurting Gio, of failing to recognize the signs, and of acting like a cold stranger to his own child. But he also doesn't know how to rebuild from the wreckage, not when trust is shattered, and the damage runs deep on both sides. Meanwhile, Lulu, the woman he once loved, lost, and who has now suddenly returned, is making moves that only worsen the pressure. She wants to restore the family dynamic, reclaim her role as a mother. But her approach to reconnecting with Gio and Rocco leaves Dante feeling pushed aside, as if his mistakes are irreparable. In Lulu's eyes, protecting Rocco and bonding with Gio is her path to redemption. In Dante's, it's proof that he's losing his place, as a father, a family anchor, and most devastating of all, as a man who can keep himself together. The more Dante tries to regain control, the more he loses his way. Rocco begins to pull away, sensing his father's unstable state and the tension from Lulu's return. Gio, frozen in pain, is torn between resentment and longing, unsure whether to accept Dante or keep him at arm's length. And Lulu, with her instinct to protect, unknowingly escalates the situation by siding with the children and trying to re-establish order, unaware that Dante is slipping closer to the edge. In the background, a darker shadow quietly manipulates the chaos, Sunny. He watches every move Dante, Gio, and Lulu make, not to protect, but to control. Sunny is taking dark steps to preserve the family legacy his own way, even using his power and influence to correct what he believes Dante is failing to do. But Sunny's covert interference is pushing Dante into deeper paranoia. When Dante learns that his own father has secretly ordered surveillance on Lulu, is trying to shape Joe's path, and might even be manipulating Rocco's legal circumstances, the fragile trust between them shatters. Dante feels betrayed, trapped, and manipulated, even by the people he loves most. And that's one of the worst symptoms of psychological crisis, when the victim can no longer tell what's real, what's a threat, who's helping, and who's controlling. Dante is living that reality now. He can't trust anyone. He can't speak to Lulu. He can't approach Gio without fearing he'll make things worse. He can't talk to Sunny without feeling like he's battling a force too large to fight. And when a man like Dante, once the embodiment of logic and integrity, completely loses his bearings, he becomes dangerously vulnerable to destructive impulses. This breakdown, if left unaddressed, could ignite a true tragedy, the collapse of Dante, as a father, as a son, and as a man. And if that happens, he won't suffer alone. Gio will lose the chance to bond with his father. Lulu will have to witness the fall of the man who once held her together. Rocco will lose his foundation. And Port Charles will be rocked by the devastating truth, the protector has become the one in need of saving. What was meant to be a correction for stability is now accelerating a psychological catastrophe. And only when someone looks deep into Dante's eyes, sees the silent scream for help hiding inside, will there be a chance to stop the final tragedy from unfolding. Dante is spiraling into a full-blown psychological breakdown, one that no one in his family saw coming, and one that no one managed to stop in time. Everything he had quietly built over the years, his courage, professional ethics, devotion to his family, love for Sam, and fatherly bond with Rocco, is collapsing layer by layer, like a structure exploding from the inside. The tragic irony is that this collapse didn't come from a dangerous enemy, a high-profile case, or a criminal conspiracy, but from a long-buried chain of truths kept hidden by the very people Dante loves most. When Dante discovered that Gio is his biological son, a child he never knew existed, a boy he had scolded, distrusted, and painfully pushed away, the entire moral foundation within him instantly shattered. He felt not only like a failure as a father but deeply betrayed by Lulu, Brooke Lynn, and even his family, people who chose silence, who let him live in the dark while Gio, his own flesh and blood, stood right before him like a stranger. misunderstood and wounded by a father who didn't even know he was a father. That revelation, combined with Rocco's own emotional crisis and Lulu's sudden return with her attempt to reclaim the family in her own way, became the final catalyst for the resurgence of Dante's long-suppressed PTSD. At first came the dreams, unclear and tangled with flashbacks from brutal undercover missions and images of Gio staring at him with tear-filled eyes. Then came the daytime hallucinations. Unexplained anger, and piercing glares that even made his loved ones back away. Olivia tried to convince Dante to see a mental health professional, but he refused, insisting he was fine. Sam held his hand at night, only to be pushed away with a coldness she had never seen in him. Gio, who had only just begun to open his heart, found the door slammed shut again by a father spiraling into the depths of emotional devastation. Lulu tried to intervene but was repeatedly pushed away, accused in a loop of obsessive, irrational blame. And Sonny, the man who always believed his power could protect everything, now stood helpless as his son lost his grip on reality. Dante began acting like a man under siege by invisible forces. He shut out the world, avoided the police station, refused to meet anyone, and at one point, locked himself in his bedroom for days. He scribbled chaotic notes on pieces of paper, trapped in memories of war zones, of missions, of gunfire, and now of Gio, Rocco, and the fear of losing everything. There came a moment when he drew his gun on an innocent civilian during a routine investigation, not because they posed a threat, but because, in that moment, they were part of the nightmare rising inside his mind. That incident, combined with an increasing pattern of erratic behavior, forced the Port Charles authorities to make a heartbreaking decision. Dante had to be removed, not as punishment, but for emergency treatment. The decision to commit him to Ferncliffe, a high-security psychiatric facility, was not something anyone wanted, but it quickly became the only option to prevent an even greater tragedy. On the day Dante was taken away, the air in the Falconary, Corinthos household felt like it had stopped. Olivia cried until she had no tears left. Sonny stood in the shadows, silent. Lulu held Rocco and Gio tightly, choked by a grief she couldn't express. And Gio, the boy once wounded by that very man, now screamed in despair, begging them not to take his father away. But it was too late. Dante was no longer someone who could talk, apologize, or even recognize where he was. He screamed in panic, pounded on the glass, whispering first Rocco's name, then Joe's. Like a lost child crying for his mother in the dead of night. Sending Dante to Ferncliffe marked not just a new chapter, but the confirmation that a catastrophe had already happened. No longer just a threat. No longer a fear. Dante had been broken, by pain, by unhealed trauma, by truths buried too long. Now, Port Charles must confront a massive void. A model officer no longer standing guard for justice, a father no longer by his son's side, a man who no longer recognizes his reflection. Dante's story isn't just a personal tragedy, it's a warning for everyone who's ever thought psychological wounds could be ignored. It proves that if trauma isn't healed in time, if love is delayed too long, even the strongest souls can fall apart. And in that collapse, it's not just one person who goes down, it's an entire family, a whole town, and a world that once believed in him. Now, new, twisted storyline is quietly unfolding around Dante. As his psychological breakdown leads him to Ferncliffe, a psychiatric facility known not just for treatment, but also for harboring dark secrets, dangerous schemes, and people who are far more than just patients. Though he was admitted to treat his PTSD and his mental collapse after discovering that Gio is his son. Many believe Ferncliffe will be a place of healing. But no one realizes that Ferncliffe might actually be the start of something far more sinister, a closed-loop nightmare, where Dante's past is already lying in wait to strike back. The biggest problem? Dante is not just a patient at Ferncliffe. He is a former police officer, a man who exposed underground networks, arrested powerful criminals, some of whom now share the same facility. No one expected it, but this places Dante in mortal danger. His old enemies, people he arrested, pursued, humiliated, now have access to him at a time when he is defenseless, unarmed, and mentally unstable. In Ferncliffe, his reputation is no longer a shield, it's a target. What's worse is that Dante has no idea. He believes he's being treated. He starts trying to cooperate, to eat, to communicate again. But behind the sterile white halls, behind the seemingly harmless eyes of fellow patients, lie men who once swore vengeance on him. One of them was shot in the leg by Dante during a drug bust. Another lost an entire money laundering network because of his reports. And there are former high-level operatives, some once affiliated with WSB, who were exposed by Dante's secret files. Now, they all share one thing: burning hatred, and Dante, vulnerable, unstable, and unprotected, is the perfect prey. This shift, from treatment center to death trap, reveals a terrifying truth. Dante wasn't sent to Ferncliffe to be healed. He was sent to be eliminated. Quietly. Without gunshots. Without evidence. This is no longer just a psychological tragedy. It's a carefully orchestrated purge, where powerful forces plan to take advantage of his broken state to finish him off when he can't fight back. The horror becomes clearer as strange things begin to happen around Dante. His medication appears tampered with, making him sleepier than usual. Minor accidents, like slipping, locked doors, or missing personal notes, begin to mount. Patients he tries to talk to seem to know too much about his past, not out of curiosity, but as if they were instructed. Some laugh menacingly as he walks by. Others whisper names of criminals he once arrested. All of it paints a terrifying picture. Dante is running out of time. If someone, Olivia, Sonny, or Jason, doesn't soon realize what's happening and begin investigating the strange occurrences inside Ferncliffe, Dante might be handled as an internal accident, vanished, or found dead from a mysterious medical complication. No one outside will suspect a thing. And no one inside will speak. The story of a man who once hunted criminals, now becoming the hunted, is one of Port Charles's darkest plot twists yet. It proves that even heroes can fall quietly and unjustly, if they're not protected in time. And Ferncliffe, once thought to be a place of recovery, is becoming a silent prison of shadows, where a man like Dante, in his most fragile state, is becoming the prime target of merciless revenge by those who once feared him most. If no one stops this soon, Ferncliffe won't be a place of healing. It will become the grave of a man whose life once stood as a beacon of justice, honor, and light. Gio, who had been on the sidelines of his inner struggles, suddenly becomes the key player in controlling a volatile and dangerous situation. When Dante, his biological father, falls into a state of severe psychological breakdown, suffers a PTSD relapse and is taken to Ferncliffe. The fact that Gio is Dante's son is no longer just a family shock, but becomes the fulcrum for a powerful adjustment in the entire plot. When all of Dante's loved ones, from Olivia to Lulu, from Sonny to Sam, are repelled by the emotional and mental walls collapsing inside him, Gio is the only one close enough in nature, different enough in approach, to penetrate the psychological void that is cracking inside Dante. While the professionals at Ferncliffe were treating Dante with medication, therapy, and security, Gio, through his own barely established but potentially powerful blood relationship, was the one who could connect with the remaining part of Dante's self. He was unlike the relatives who had accompanied Dante all along. He was a symbol of what Dante had lost, a second chance to start over, to not continue to live in the obsession of failure, hurt, and loss. Gio entered Dante's life not as a child waiting for love, but as a young man learning to forgive, understand, and take responsibility for his own existence. And it was that attitude that made Dante, in his rare moments of lucidity at Ferncliffe, begin to waver. Gio did not say much. He did not blame. He did not question. He sat quietly beside his father, telling stories, sharing memories of music, talking about Rocco as a real brother, and sometimes just a look was enough to calm the turmoil that was screaming in Dante's mind. Joe's role was more than just holding the family together. He was holding the heartbeat of a dying man. He was the last breath that kept Dante grounded in the real world. While others saw Dante through the lens of a once strong man, Gio saw him as a lost father, and that allowed him to be more patient, more understanding, and more courageous in entering the darkness that Dante was trapped in. It was through this that Gio began to have a positive effect on the treatment professionals. Dante's medical records began to change. The nightmares became less frequent. The panic in his eyes began to soften at the sound of Joe's familiar voice. And most importantly, Dante begins to call his son by name, no longer unconsciously, but with real recognition, a crucial step in the recovery process. But the journey is not easy. Outside Ferncliffe, those hostile to Dante begin to realize that Gio is the weakest link in the key to reversing the situation. Joe's access to and gradual control over Dante's psyche causes those who want to punish him to start targeting Gio himself. He is not only trying to save his father, but also facing the risk of being manipulated, threatened, and even attacked by those who still resent Dante's past. And this creates a fierce internal conflict. Gio, who has just entered a father-son relationship, now has to choose between his own safety and his duty to save the father he has only just learned to love. The story is no longer just about a man falling apart because of PTSD. It has become a journey of two generations, one searching for himself in the cracks of time, and a young man searching for a role, identity, and love in a chaotic world. The new crazy adjustment that fate is placing on Dante, salvation through the son he once did not know, is what makes this story deeper and more intense than ever. And if Gio can continue to believe, if he can do what no one else has done, awaken the remaining humanity in Dante with unconditional love, then he will not only save his father, but also rewrite his own story, like a symphony reborn from the broken, where the final note is not a note of tears, but of hope.